there is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
So for the better part of the week, I was trying to find something interesting for us to talk about, something interesting for us to sink our teeth into. But really, everything going on in the world of politics has just been, well, really, really dumb. And then we got the news about the Chinese spy balloon, and that's what got me thinking about the global war. And so I figured we should probably take a look at where everything stands. We'll talk about the conflict between Israel and Iran, China and Russia, and how all of this may play out. Now just keep in mind that I'm trying to work these things out for myself, so if you disagree with something or think I'm getting something wrong, just let me know. Okay, so let's try to make sense out of the chaos. The US military just shot down a Chinese spy balloon over the Atlantic Ocean, after, of course, letting it fly over the country for days. As the Babylon Bee joked about a few days ago. So Joe Biden says he'll shoot down the Chinese spy balloon as soon as he's done letting it spy. Yes, when jokes become reality. And you know, all that data transmitted over the last 4 days, all of that data about our military locations and ICBMs, well, more than likely, it was all sent to China in real time. So yeah, there's that. Mission accomplished, I guess. It went across damn near the entire continental United States, checked out our military tech and installations before finally being shot down around South Carolina. So Joe Biden said that he ordered General Milley to shoot it down back on Wednesday, but they deliberately ignored his order. Okay. Well, we really have to take everything we're hearing about this with a shitload of salt. We can't really trust anything. But NBC News reported that Lloyd Austin and General Milley and, well, other commanders reviewed the threat of the Chinese stratospheric balloon and presented several options to Joe Biden. So, after evaluating the threat, the US military, along with the White House, opted to not shoot down the balloon. And I quote, "Debris from the floating device could possibly injure a civilian," end of quote. And, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a complete lie. I mean, it could, but is it likely? Not really. Anyway, now the claim is that the US military was able to stop the spy balloon from being able to gather sensitive information. And then we're trying to track the intention based upon what they were targeting. You know, a sort of spy versus spy game. Again, I have no idea who or what we can trust these days, but that does make sense, sure. However, I will say, with the way this administration has been handling situations, I am in doubt of their competence. Okay, so let's get into it. Because I think there's something more going on. I don't know what, but we're going to try to understand it just a little bit better. So we've talked about World War III a few times. However, it's pretty hard to speculate timing, because most people still believe that the real war doesn't kick off until about 2025 or so. Now, don't get me wrong. I think we are at war right now. However, I think we're still in the preparation phase. Across the world, you can see pretty much everybody getting on the war footing. But there is a part of me that believes there is something far more sinister afoot. And what I mean is this. Now doesn't it seem like they're dismantling the military and intentionally making us weaker for some quote-unquote unknown reason? Now, I know this is going to come as a shocker to most of you, but I think it all revolves around the global agenda unfolding right before our eyes. You know, the Great Reset, Agenda 2030, dissolving the United States and moving to a global regulatory body, the end of sovereignty as we know it, setting up the new global order, the carbon markets, and as the World Economic Forum said, the US will not be the world's superpower by 2030. And so to me, it does seem like we were handing over our global power to aspects of the United Nations, which in turn will be controlled by who else but China. And the reason being is because they're all in China's pocket too. And it's pretty evident. Just watch how they bend the knee over human rights violations, the COVID pandemic, their intellectual property theft, their de facto control over global big tech. The European nations are adopting their social credit systems. We are too. Well, the US establishment wants to, but I don't think they're going to get their way. I hope not, anyway. But that's not all. They are also adopting their surveillance systems. It all points to something larger happening. A global realignment under the thumb of China. However, let's try to go through some examples. Some of the moves being made truly baffle me. Okay, so we know that many of our politicians are in fact in bed with China, both parties. And that is especially true at the top levels, the US establishment. They're in bed with China through financial deals, Wall Street, corporate ties, lobbying firms, defense contractors, the global economy in general. How a lot of our most sensitive products are actually manufactured in China. And so many of our politicians sell out American interests to pad their own bottom line. Let's take a look at our media. CNN and the Washington Post attend an annual journalism conference put on by the Communist Party. And you can see this on the screen right now.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous.
The Chinese government has many infiltration programs, and a lot of our political figures have been caught up either due to their greed or lust. And both are effective tools against the weak-minded. Now, in relation to some other aspects, parts of our military seem to be compromised as well.
As you alluded to in the previous question, China is not an enemy. And I think that's important for people to clearly understand. China is a rising power. China has been a rising power since Deng Xiaoping in '79, and they've been clicking off at 10% growth for almost 30 years, and they dropped down to about 7% the last year or two, and they'll probably drop again, and come into the range of normalcy and 3 to 5% growth. But that's still significant economic growth, and there's been a really large historic change from a North Atlantic-based global economy to now it's proceeding to be a North Pacific-based global economy. So with respect to China, what normally happens historically, it's not in all cases, but in most cases, where you have economic growth of that magnitude typically follows military power. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a significant increase in Chinese military capabilities over the last 10 to 20 years. And they are going to develop themselves and are developing themselves into a great power. That is not to say, however, that they are an enemy. China is not an enemy.
Do you happen to remember General Milley saying that he would warn China about Trump's planned military moves? Yeah, he's not the only one either. Anyway, one can hope that capitulation, appeasement, and a weak approach to China, a weak approach to our military in general, is some sort of, it's all a ruse to appear weak when in fact we are strong. And I'm starting to kind of doubt that. Anyway, there are so many examples that give me cause for concern. Everything from our energy policies, which are going to ravage Europe, and more than likely, it's going to send them running into the arms of China. Our allies are realigning. We are seeing this to a degree right now. But again, that is not all. The Green Revolution lays the power in the hands of China due to minerals and resources needed for the new tech, the new Green Revolution. And again, that is not all. However, we have a few other baffling moves, such as depleting our strategic reserves while on the eve of war, the medical mandates that got rid of some of our best soldiers, the demoralization campaigns in the military, the advertising they use to seemingly intentionally make us look weak, the war setup with Russia through Ukraine, the billions of weapons left in the Middle East, giving Bagram Air Base to China basically. Take any example. I don't know how any of this makes sense strategically, and the reason being is because it doesn't make sense. So, some more examples. We know that China gets state agents into positions within corporate America. They take part in lobbying initiatives. They have installed police stations in the United States and Canada. Well, the FBI raided them recently, but I don't trust the FBI either. Anyway, they are also buying farmland, which happens to be next to military bases. But again, that's not all. I recently heard that China bought military academies in the United States, and so I had to look that one up myself, and it turns out it's true. Yes, it's true. How crazy is that? Anyway, and I quote, New York Military Academy sold in bidding war to Chinese investors. In 2015, a political advisory board for the CCP purchased the New York Military Academy for $16 million. And then in 2017, a Chinese education conglomerate purchased a military academy in Florida. Both of these military academies have ROTC programs and train military officers for the U.S. Army. Now, does any of this make sense? Chinese police stations in the United States, China buying up farmland next to military bases and no one cares, China buying our military academies that produce officers. Yeah, I don't think any of this makes any sense at all. which makes me think something more sinister is going on. Again though, let me know what you think. Are they really handing over the keys to the US to China? Is it all a part of the new global order? The UN and China basically running the new system? Or is it something that I simply just haven't thought about? Let me know because your guess is as good as mine. Anyway, back to the spy balloon momentarily. So the DoD announced on Thursday that they have been monitoring a suspected Chinese spy balloon floating over the US for over 2 days. As it turns out though, they have been tracking the spy balloon since the Aleutian Islands. Yes, they could have shot it down over water, but instead allowed it to enter US airspace. And ultimately, they allowed it to float across the entire United States, with a suspected stop to check out some of our ICBM missile tech. So yeah, good plan I guess, right? Now I do have to say that at first, China claimed that it was some sort of weather balloon, a civilian craft that just wandered off course, really, really far off course. But if you believe the CCP, then I don't know, really, you shouldn't be taking anything any government tells you at face value. But yeah, the CCP is lying. Someone tracked the movement and it traces back right to central China. They also have the ability to steer it. However, apparently it's common knowledge that it's a limited ability to steer. But still, this was intentional. Even if it was just to gauge our response or something along those lines. And if that's the case, then I think they got the answer they were looking for. Yes, we won't do anything substantial about it. However, when this happened, I was thinking to myself, how is it that with all the tech we know about and all the tech we don't know about, spy balloons are still the top of the line gear? Anyway, to that end, let's try to find out a little bit more about the capabilities of spy balloons.
Thunderhead balloon systems are stratospheric platforms that can be rapidly deployed to areas of interest from a wide variety of locations. Utilizing Raven Aerostar's mission planning tools, a flight path is determined to optimize point-to-point navigation. Navigation is achieved by leveraging directional wind patterns in the stratosphere at altitudes 65,000 feet and above. After arriving at an area of interest, Thunderhead balloon systems offer network persistence for up to months at a time. Filling a significant capability gap, Thunderhead balloon systems allow for rapid integration of diverse payloads and sensors, serving a wide range of missions. A military outpost stands with a mission to provide intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance over denied airspace. Raven Aerostar's Thunderhead balloon systems provide a cost-effective and low-risk platform for ISR capabilities at altitudes above traditional air threats. The local commander deploys several Thunderhead balloon systems from the At-Ready constellation, carrying sophisticated ISR sensors to the denied airspace. With navigational and duration capabilities of up to months at a time, the Thunderhead balloon systems provide a powerful, persistent surveillance platform. At stratospheric altitudes, these lighter-than-air platforms can navigate and hover over areas of interest at altitudes unattainable by traditional ISR platforms. Upon receiving information regarding a possible threat, intelligence analysts navigate a Thunderhead balloon system over the area of interest to collect more information. The sensor payload carried by the Thunderhead balloon system quickly detects and classifies the threat. Utilizing real-time communications, the threat parameters are relayed back to the intelligence analyst on the ground.
So, yeah, that's pretty crazy. You learn something new every day. So, Russia is amassing hundreds of thousands of troops, weapons, and military vehicles getting ready for a massive offensive. If this is in fact the reality of the situation, as we know, Russia, China, and Iran have formed an alliance. The alliance goes beyond just military coordination and delves into the formation of a new global economic system. We have talked about this many times. However, we are not here to talk about the implementation of the BRIC financial system and the threat that this poses. So let's just try to stick to the military stuff for right now. Well, if it is true that Russia is planning a massive offensive, and I'm pretty sure one is currently happening right now. Anyway, with what's being reported as up to 500,000 troops, well, that means that China and Iran are going to have to take a more direct role, as naturally this kind of military action from Russia will force the hand of NATO and the United States. So how would they prepare for such an event? Well, they would need to gather intelligence first, which they have been doing constantly, even before all of this really began. But let's say they are worried about retaliation, or if the plan is to use some tactical nukes on the European battlefield. If that is the case, they would need real-time intelligence on our capability to respond in kind, which means they would have to monitor our nuclear sites, and this is what's being reported. So, some are also speculating that it could be some sort of test run for an offensive weapon. There is another quote-unquote spy balloon currently flying over Latin America as well, and there is reportedly a third one off the coast of the United States once again. In regards to offensive capabilities, we have a lot of people speculating that it could be a test run for some sort of EMP. If it is an EMP that goes off on the East Coast, about 70% of our grid goes down, with the assumption that the ramifications could last up to a year after detonation. And, that would suck. That would really, really suck, man. Look, I don't know. I just know we aren't getting the full story, obviously. When have we ever received the full story without ripping it out of them and forcing the truth from their lying mouths? We haven't. More than likely, we're being lied to in some capacity here, too. However, to prepare for a massive offensive, as what is being claimed, you would need to gain intelligence, a la the quote-unquote spy balloon, and surely more advanced satellites overhead working in conjunction with this balloon. But besides intelligence gathering, you would need to perform some sort of wartime posturing to either dissuade the US from retaliation, or on the other hand, to simply prepare for the inevitable clash. To that end, Russia has moved a warship off the US coast. Yes, they say, and I quote, a nuclear-armed Russian warship is parked off the US eastern seaboard. Its hypersonic missiles are reportedly unstoppable, end of quote. As you can see, it does appear that things are escalating. Now, all of these developments follow a series of other escalations, and yeah, okay, that was a confusing way to put it. What I mean is that before this quote-unquote spy balloon, before the Russian warship sailed, and even before we received confirmation on the pending Russian offensive, well, we received a Taiwan invasion alert. Taiwan's scrambled fighter jets put their navy on standby and activated missile systems in response to 34 Chinese jets and 9 warships, as NATO warns of a dangerous situation. And yeah, it is pretty dangerous, that is true. And then of course we have the other ally, Iran. The tensions between Israel and Iran are rising at a rapid pace. And personally, I tend to believe it's all related to the world war that is unfolding right before our eyes. And basically, if you've ever heard of Albert Pike or his predictions for World War III, well, Israel and Iran starting it off is pretty much the scenario he suggested. And so the other day, Iran was bombed. So the ambassador to the UN said that the findings indicated that Israel was, and I quote, responsible for this attempted act of aggression, end of quote. And Iran responded to that, saying they reserve the right to respond resolutely to any threats or wrongful actions by Israel. So, as we all know, these two countries are arch foes, and in recent years have been engaged in what has been described as a quote-unquote shadow war of unclaimed attacks on each other's assets, infrastructure, and nationals. Israel is mostly known to have carried out strikes on what it says are Iranian weapons transfers to militants in Lebanon, and is also believed to have sabotaged Iran's nuclear sites and killed Iranian nuclear scientists. Iran, which openly rejects Israel's right to exist, has been accused by Israel of attacking and planning to attack Israeli and Jewish targets and people. So the purpose of the attack site is unclear, though reports suggest it could be connected to missile production. So US media have quoted unnamed US officials as saying that Israel carried out the attack, which Iran has said involved 3 drones. Iran is claiming that one of the drones was destroyed by air defense systems and 2 were caught by defense traps, causing minor damage to the building and no casualties. However, from the videos I've seen, there does seem to be extensive damage. So again, take it all with a grain of salt. The Israeli government has said that they are going to take action against certain weapons development areas in Iran. However, they never confirmed nor denied the current attack. And I quote, I never talk about specific operations, and every time some explosion takes place in the Middle East, Israel is blamed or given responsibility. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not, end of quote. Now another interesting point to make is that a 5.9 magnitude earthquake happened in northwest Iran, right before the drone attacks took place. Very, very strange timing. We have heard of weather weapons, tsunami bombs, and I'm pretty sure we've heard about weapons that initiate earthquakes. I have nothing to corroborate this, but nonetheless, I think it's pretty interesting, don't you think? An interesting connection.
Ekranlarınıza geldi bile. Bu görüntü Bilecik'ten. Güvenlik kamerasının saatine dikkat. 04.08 yani tam da deprem anı. Aynı anda Düzce'nin değişik yerleri ve Zonguldak'ta da benzer görüntüler kayıt altına alındı. Sarsıntıyla beraber bir top ışık hüzmesi belirdi. İşte böyle ve kayboldu. Daha önce başka
deprem oluyor gene. Gel.
Anyway, so they have been targeting multiple installations that Iran has in Syria as well, which I was not aware of. Israel is actively targeting military bases in Syria, huh? Okay, so wouldn't you think that would be talked about a little bit more? But, yeah. Anyway, they say that Israel has been particularly alarmed at Iran's supply of precision-guided rockets and missiles to its proxies within striking distance of Israeli cities, and it has carried out numerous airstrikes against these missile bases and supply lines in Syria, with little perceptible response from Iran so far. So the main theme of this quote-unquote shadow war is brinkmanship. Neither side can afford to look weak, but both Iran and Israel know they need to carefully calibrate their actions so not to trigger an all-out war. So on the nuclear side, it is clear that Israeli intelligence has been able to penetrate Iranian security to an astounding degree, deploying both human agents on the ground and cyber weapons to overcome Iranian countermeasures. So in Syria and Lebanon, there is always the option for Iran to deploy its proxies to launch missiles against the Israeli state, but this is extremely risky. Israel has made it clear that the magnitude of their response would be epic in proportion. And so expert John Rain says, and I quote, "Due to Israel's superior intelligence capabilities, well, it means that Iran has to be content with itself using blunt responses through its proxies." And I quote again, "A frustrating situation for Iran. Its best partner for striking Israel is Hezbollah. However, that would be a clear escalatory move, which could embroil Hezbollah in the war that Iran wants to avoid. The Iranians usually have an asymmetrical advantage. However, with Israel, they are being outboxed. The Israelis have a longer reach, faster footwork, and when they decide to strike bluntly, as they have been doing in Syria, they hit harder." End of quote. And so with these drone strikes, we have to assume that this is going to be viewed as an act of aggression, and likewise, we have to assume that things are escalating. Look, who knows what the truth is? Unfortunately, with the media as it is right now, we have to be the ones to connect the dots ourselves. Are they seeding the public consciousness, or is this the reality of the situation? I don't know. You're going to have to make your own conclusions on that one. However, I will say, with everything on the war front escalating all at the same time, we have to assume that things are going to go from bad to worse. We are even starting to get stories like this, seeding the public consciousness, trying to prepare people for the inevitable, or is it all for clicks? I don't know. I'm not so sure, but they say, and I quote, "Nuclear war between the US and Russia would kill more than 5 billion people, just from starvation alone." End of quote. You know, there is one part of this that is very interesting to me. And it's the fact that you see all these global leaders and thought leaders, if you want to call them that. I personally wouldn't because I think they're all idiots. However, they do consistently talk about how they need to remove about 5 billion people from existence to stop climate change. Now, what's interesting, I think, is how the numbers line up. We have this guy, one of the founding members of the Club of Rome, Agenda 21, and the Limits to Growth Report, Mr. Dennis Meadows. Well, he says that the Earth can only support about 2 billion people.
The planet can support something like 1 billion people, maybe 2 billion, depending on how much liberty and how much material consumption you want to have. If you want more liberty and more consumption, you have to have fewer people. And conversely, you can have more people. I mean, we could even have 8 or 9 billion probably if we have a very strong dictatorship, which is smart. Unfortunately, you never have smart dictatorships. They're always stupid. So, but if you had a smart dictatorship and a low standard of living, you can have it. But we want to have freedom and we want to have a high sentence. So we're going to have 1 billion people. And we're now at 7, so we have to get back down.
Then, of course, we have people like Ted Turner and Bill Gates, who also use this number. About 1 or 2 billion people is all that is sustainable. It's all the Earth can hold. Now again, what I thought was interesting is that this nuclear war is going to get them down to that exact number. We have about 7 or 8 billion people on Earth. They say nuclear war would get rid of about 5 billion. And then disease and poverty, well, that's going to take care of about what? Another 500 million? Maybe another billion? Well, what do you know? That brings them down to their magical number for the new utopia. But I just thought it was interesting. Isn't it? Don't you think so? If not, alright, I'll back off. Anyway, in this article, they say the toll of nuclear war would be instantly catastrophic for those who are within the immediate path of the weapons. Yeah, no shit, dude. However, a new study shows just how deadly the scope of such a war would be. A nuclear war would cause worldwide famine, according to the study, published in Nature Food on Monday. A massive amount of soot and ash would block sunlight, disrupt climate systems, and limit food production. Yeah, I mean, is anybody surprised by that? I'm not. Anyway, and I quote, "It would be a global catastrophe for food security." End of quote. Yes, nuclear war would help with their agenda quite a bit. From depopulation to food security. You know, destroying food security because, as we all know, if you control the food, you control the people. Anyway, yes, heavy speculation, I know. Anyway, in this article they detail what would happen, even with a small nuke going off between nations like India and Pakistan. And then, of course, they detail what it would be like if the United States, Russia, and China got into a nuclear war. Now, I'm not going to go into all the particulars, you just have to know one thing, that basically, it's time to kiss your ass goodbye, okay? That's it, you're done. Yes, they also say that once a nuclear war starts, it's going to be very, very difficult to limit escalation. And, yes, that is true. People better wake up before the nukes start falling. Anyway, they say that nuclear war would destroy the planet for about a decade, and yeah, as I said, we're all pretty much effed if this happens. And to that end, they end their article with quite an ominous statement. And I quote, "Future problems are brewing. I guarantee it." End of quote. Yes, I tend to agree. I think we are heading towards something. I can't necessarily claim I know what is coming, but whatever happens, I have a feeling it won't be good. The thing is that it's very hard to tell exactly who wants what, and who is intentionally pushing for war as a way to install their global agenda. What I mean is this, and I quote, "The deep state is real." And that is according to the ex-chief advisor to Boris Johnson, Dominic Cummings. In the article, he said the so-called deep state, a moniker for the unelected bureaucracy, wields far more power than the elected politicians. End of quote. And yes, I tend to agree with this as well. With all of their conflicts of interest, their financial incentives to establish this new global order. Now, if you combine that with their psychopathy and their God complex, well, it's kind of hard to tell what's organic and what's being forced through. Now, on the war front, we have one more story to talk about. The schism between the US establishment and the rest of the world. Yes, there seems to be multiple warring factions within the government. Factions that believe in different tactics and believe different scenarios are more important than others. And I quote, "There is a division within the US government on the Ukrainian issue. On the one hand, as the two German deputies describe it, they have guys like Jake Sullivan and the head of the CIA, and apparently they want to increase involvement in Ukraine in an effort to end the war quickly so that they can turn our focus to the looming big war with China." End of quote. Yes, I do think we were heading towards a big war with China, that's for sure. Then on the other hand, we have Anthony Blinken and Lloyd Austin. They do not want to let Russia get a pass, and they want to escalate war with them directly. So okay, now that we have a pretty good understanding of what's happening on the war front, I mean with everything else we have going on in the world too, it does seem like we have a perfect storm of dysfunction and calamity ahead. Yes, in fact, their entire agenda can be summed up pretty simply. It's about establishing a new economic order, which of course will consist of a switch from the petrodollar to a central bank digital currency backed by carbon markets, which will be facilitated through AI and social surveillance programs. And so for now, I guess we just have to wait to see where all of this goes. Once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.